Hello again, and welcome back to our journey through Stoic wisdom in the modern world. If you're new here, I'm grateful you've joined. If you find value in what we share together, I'd ask you to like this video, subscribe, and ring the bell. It helps us reach more people who are looking for peace in a noisy world, and it tells me that these reflections are finding a home in your life. Now let me take you to a very different kind of battlefield. Not a diner with politics this time, but a kitchen in Texas. A husband and wife, both in their late 50s, stand at opposite ends of the room. He has just come home from work. She has been waiting all day to talk. The subject is small, maybe bills, or the way he forgot to call, or how she feels he's been distant. At first, it's ordinary conversation. Then a tone shifts. A word comes out sharper than intended. The husband fires back with his own edge. Within minutes, the air is electric. If you've lived in a marriage or raised children or tried to keep peace with aging parents, you know this pattern. Words multiply, volume rises. And yet, strangely, the more words fill the air, the less connection there is. In that Texas kitchen, the argument swelled until finally the husband stopped. He closed his mouth, put the glass he was holding on the counter, and sat down. Silent. His wife braced for the next volley. But it never came. The silence stretched. At first, it felt like stone-heavy uncomfortable. Then something softened. The edge in her voice melted. The heat in his chest cooled. They sat breathing in the same room in quiet. And in that quiet, they found a path back to one another. What happened? Nothing on the surface. But in reality, everything changed, because silence can be stronger than words. The Stoics understood this deeply. Epictetus said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." Seneca warned that the more talk, the more mischief. And Marcus Aurelius, writing in his journal at night, reminded himself that restraint, holding back words, was often the highest form of wisdom. We live in a culture that worships expression. Social media tells us, say it now, say it loud, say it often. In relationships, we're told communicate, communicate, communicate. And there is truth in that unspoken needs can corrode love. But the Stoics would add a warning: communication without restraint becomes noise, and noise destroys intimacy. Let me ask you, how many times in your life have you made things worse by speaking too soon, too much, or too harshly? And how many times have you regretted silence? If you're honest, the first list is probably longer than the second. One of my patients years ago was a man in his 60s, long married, who said, "I've never once regretted pausing before I spoke. But I've regretted almost every time I let my anger run my mouth." Silence in relationships is not absence. It's presence deepened. It's choosing to value the bond more than the victory. It's remembering, as Seneca put it, that to insult is beneath you, but to be insulted is not beneath your dignity. I've seen silence heal friendships. A woman in Florida told me she had a lifelong friend who one day said something cruel during a difficult season. Instead of firing back or cutting her off, she chose silence. She let time pass. Weeks later, her friend called in tears, apologizing. "If I had matched her words with my own," the woman said, "I'd have lost her forever." Silence doesn't mean approval. It doesn't mean weakness. It means discipline. The discipline to choose the relationship over the ego. And sometimes silence is the only language the heart can hear. The power of silence shows itself most clearly when tempers are high. Think of the last argument you witnessed, maybe with your spouse, or between siblings, or even parents and grown children. You can almost see the rhythm of it. One voice rises, the other answers higher. Words become weapons. The faster they come, the sharper they cut. And then suddenly, one person goes quiet. At first, that silence feels like a wall. But if it is not laced with contempt, if it is a true pause, a conscious act of restraint, it changes everything. The quarrel collapses under its own weight. The anger has nowhere to land. The Stoics believed this was strength. Seneca warned his readers that he who does not restrain his tongue will often regret the words he let loose. He was not telling us to suppress forever, but to master the timing of speech. In relationships, timing is the difference between a fight and a conversation, between a wound and a bridge. I remember a man in his 70s, married for 52 years. He told me, "The secret to our marriage is that I learned when not to answer. I still disagree. I still have my opinions. But I've discovered that silence in the moment often protects love better than words." This is not passivity. It is active wisdom. It is Marcus Aurelius reminding himself, you always own the option of having no opinion. There is never any need to get worked up or to trouble your soul about things you can't control. Imagine applying that to the small frictions of daily life, a sarcastic remark, a forgotten chore, a careless word. You feel the sting, but instead of answering immediately, you choose silence. You wait. Often the moment dissolves on its own. And if the issue is real, you can return later, calmer, clearer, more loving. One woman shared with me how this worked with her daughter. The daughter in her 30s snapped at her during a stressful week. In the past, the mother would have fired back. This time she said nothing. 2 hours later, the daughter came and apologized. If I had argued, the mother told me she would have dug in. My silence gave her the space to see herself. That's the secret. Silence gives others room to reflect. Words trap us in defense. Silence frees us to soften. But let's be honest. Silence can also wound when used as punishment. Some of you know the pain of the silent treatment days of cold withdrawal, of absence disguised as discipline. That is not Stoic silence. That is manipulation. The difference is intention. Stoic silence is not about control, but about clarity. Not about freezing someone out, but about keeping yourself from making harm worse. Epictetus said, "If someone speaks ill of you, do not defend yourself. Simply live in such a way that your character speaks for itself." In relationships, this means you don't need to fight every accusation. Your life is your answer. I saw this play out with a couple in their 60s. The husband was accused unjustly of neglect. He wanted to defend, to argue. Instead, he chose silence and chose action. He simply began showing care, small gestures, consistent presence. Over time, the wife realized his love. He told me later, "My silence said more than any defense could have." Science affirms what the Stoics intuited. Studies on conflict resolution show that couples who allow pauses, moments of silence, are far more likely to de-escalate and recover trust. Therapists even coach partners to take timeouts, not to withdraw, but to return more grounded. Seneca once wrote, "To be silent at the right time is the surest sign of wisdom." In our homes, that wisdom can mean the difference between a night of regret and a night of peace. So how do we practice this? First, notice the urge. The next time your spouse or friend irritates you, feel the words rushing up. Pause. Ask, is this helpful? Is this necessary, or is this just my ego demanding a win? If the answer is ego, choose silence. Second, breathe. A single breath consciously taken can slow the reflex. Marcus practiced this daily, reminding himself that the soul is colored by the thoughts it entertains. Breathing interrupts the coloring of anger. Third, remember the goal. Is your goal to win or to love, to punish or to preserve? Silence is not always the answer, but it often points us back to the true aim. I recall a grandfather who told me, "My silence is a gift I give to my grandchildren. They will remember my calm more than my lectures." And isn't that true of all our relationships? The people we love will not remember every word we spoke, but they will remember how we made them feel. Silence, wisely used, makes them feel safe. Silence, when chosen with care, does not erase truth. It prepares the ground for truth to be spoken gently at the right moment. One of my friends, a therapist in New England, once told me about a couple who had nearly divorced after decades together. Their problem was not lack of words, but too many. Each session they talked over one another, shouting, defending, accusing. Nothing landed. Finally, she asked them to sit in silence for 5 minutes before speaking. They resisted. They laughed nervously, but they tried. What happened was extraordinary. In that silence, tears began to form. The husband reached for his wife's hand. Without words, something shifted. The next conversation, spoken softly, was the first real one they'd had in years. This is why Marcus Aurelius spoke of the inner citadel. Not a castle of stone, but a fortress of composure. In relationships, the citadel is built brick by brick with restraint. Silence is the mortar that holds it together. Think, too, of friendship. How often do we rush to fill the air with advice when a friend suffers? We want to help. We want to fix. But sometimes the greatest gift is presence without commentary. A widow once told me, "The best friend I had after my husband died was the one who sat with me and said nothing." She didn't try to explain. She didn't offer cliches, she just let me cry in peace. That silence was medicine. We forget that love is often communicated most powerfully without words. The gentle hand squeezed the quiet, waiting the patient ear. The Stoics remind us that virtue is not in how loud we speak, but in how steadfastly we live. Silence used rightly builds trust. Silence misused builds walls. The difference is compassion. If your silence flows from care, it heals. If it flows from contempt, it kills. Seneca again gives us wisdom: better to trip with the feet than with the tongue. A stumble on the sidewalk bruises the knee. A stumble of words can bruise a heart for years. So here are 3 simple practices you can try this week. 1. The pause at home. When you feel the urge to answer sharply, hold it. Count to 5. Ask yourself if the bond matters more than the argument. Try this once a day. Notice how much conflict never even needs to happen. 2. The silent companion. With someone grieving or struggling, resist the urge to fill the air. Sit with them. Listen with your whole body. Your silence will say, "I am here. You are not alone." 3. The reflective journal. When silence feels heavy, give your words a page instead of a mouth. Journaling is one of the most Stoic practices. Marcus did it nightly. Writing keeps your heart honest without wounding the people you love. I knew a woman in her 70s who called her journal the safest place in my marriage. She poured all her complaints onto paper first. By the time she spoke with her husband, she had filtered anger from truth. Their conversations softened. Now, I don't want to romanticize silence. There are times when words must be spoken, when injustice demands protest, when harm must be confronted, when truth cannot be hidden. Stoicism never meant cowardice, but it did mean discernment. To know when speech serves and when silence saves. Epictetus put it this way: "Be silent, or let your words be worth more than silence." That is the standard. If what you are about to say adds more light than quiet, then speak. If not, let silence hold the space. Think of your own life. Where could silence bring healing? Maybe with a partner who speaks harshly when tired. Maybe with an adult child whose choices frustrate you. Maybe with a sibling who never quite listens. Imagine holding silence there, not as withdrawal, but as strength. And then ask yourself, where do you misuse silence? Where do you retreat not from wisdom but from fear? That too is worth noticing. True Stoic. Silence is never avoidance. It is presence without poison. As you practice, you may discover what countless men and women before you have silence wisely chosen deepens love. It builds patience. It guards peace. It keeps dignity intact when words would have shattered it. And one day, when your loved ones remember you, they will not replay every word you said. They will remember the calm in your eyes, the patience in your pauses, the steadiness of your presence. So let me leave you with this. The next time tension rises in your home, experiment with silence. Not a cold shoulder, not a weapon, but a gift. See what shifts. See how the storm weakens. And ask yourself, what does my silence communicate, love or disdain? That discernment practice daily will shape not just your relationships, but your very character. If this reflection spoke to you, I invite you to like this video, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need it. Together, we're building a community where wisdom runs deeper than noise. And in our next episode, we'll explore a theme many of you have asked about: the difference between Stoic solitude and modern loneliness. How being alone can either break us or free us. That will be episode 5. Until then, may your silence be strong, your love steady, and your heart unshaken by noise.